Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update of August 2019. We have 14 albums to get through, so let's not dibble dabble anymore and just get with the fiddle faddles.
Muscles like Superman trainer. Ay, real rare like.
This record had a hell of a hill to climb, even before it was released, because this is Chance's first record after making history at the Grammys. And I'm not going to be up here to say that it is his magnum opus, but I'm also not here to say that it is the worst thing ever. I think people are being way too hyperbolic when talking about this record. It's a fine album. It's by no means the best thing I've heard all year, but it's far from the worst. And I think this album is exemplary of what happens when you paint yourself into a corner. You know, Chance started off his career with a lot of promise. And that's not to say he squelched it at all. Because while 10 Day was a great warm-up, acid rap is still just this unique experience to go back and listen to. I fucking love acid rap. And I love the persona that Chance has on the album. And I would say that he successfully changed that on Coloring Book. Do I like Coloring Book as much as acid rap? No. But I admire Coloring Book because it's not trying to be, and it achieves something also pretty fucking great. And I was expecting The Big Day to be the same. And it is. My only issue is that I don't care to hear where Chance the Rapper is in his life at the moment, because he's everywhere. I see him all over the place. It's hard for me to really not see how happy he is, because he's on Instagram, on Twitter, just hyping himself up, and I'm happy for him. I'm not trying to rain on his parade by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that this record is too much. It's way too much. I think it starts off really fucking well, and even leads into its middle of the record pretty solidly. I think the strengths of this record, outside of Chance, because I think Chance is fine on here, are some of the features that work, like In Vogue on their song, and Nicki Minaj, when she's sprinkled throughout the record, she's used to good effect. But I think this record falls apart on tracks like Rue, 5-Year Plan, some of the skits. A lot of the tail end of the record starts to kind of meld together, and it creates this exhausting experience. It's like you're being drowned in happiness. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like in today's age, we could use more records like this. But I just feel like this record is way too much. And it makes sense that it's too much, because obviously, when you're someone like Chance who's made history, you are given opportunities to do things like work with your idols or influences like Randy Newman and In Vogue, and also bring in other people that you might have been around in circles in some regards throughout the scene, like John Legend and Nicki Minaj. And I don't think that the lyrics make this album bad. I don't mind songs that preach about monogamy or celebrate life and your place in it. Because that's also been kind of a staple of Chance's career. Why do you think he started, like when he was starting to blow up, he started singing the Arthur theme at concerts? Because he wants to bring positivity and a unique perspective on life. He's just a happy-go-lucky dude, and I'm happy to see it. But like I said, this record is pretty inconsistent and falls apart in a lot of places. The production, I don't think, is one of them. I think for a majority of the record, the production is really solid. In fact, I love, like I said, the track with In Vogue, I Got You Always and Forever. I think it's really lush and well executed. And as is the opener, All Day Long. I fucking adore that song. And I even like tracks like We Go High and Hot Shower. I think Hot Shower's fun. It's like a dram cut. Even, I don't think a redacted, because normally when a record's too long, I'm always happy to go on the redacted boat. I don't think that would fix this record. I think this record just needed a man in the studio to kind of hold Chance, rein Chance in a little bit. You know, be happy for him, but help him make a product that's more laser focused than this. But again, this record isn't terrible. It's very okay. It's very alright. And I'm happy to say that. I like a chunk of this record pretty consistently. There's songs on here that I keep coming back to that bring me this nice full of energy, this nice burst of energy that I kind of need this year. And it's got some good shit on it. I think it's solid. I'm giving it a 6. I think this is a very 6 out of 10 record. I know this is a number I've thrown out a lot this year, but this is a record that is okay. It has its problems, it has its follies, but it's far from the worst thing I've heard this year, and really just kind of on par with Chance's more underwhelming releases to me personally.
I was broke as fuck, down on for my ass, had the lowest luck.
On the other side of that, YBN Cordae made the record that not only The Big Day should have been, but J. Cole's last record should have been. I adore this thing. I think that YBN is having a shitload of fun on here, and he's got some good bars to boot. I fucking love a lot of this record. It's consistent in its production. It's got a great utilization of its features. I think Chance sounds great on Bad Idea, and Cole's production shines on here a lot better than the shit that might have been on his last couple of releases. It's weird to me, but on top of that, Anderson .Paak on R&P, that is a fucking bop. One of my favorite songs of the year. Even Ty Dolla $ign doesn't sound bad on Way Back Home. He fits the atmosphere of the song. While this record kind of has this nice wave before a come down with emotion, it doesn't get too wrapped up in its own hubris. You know, and I think that that's important. This is a nice, tight hip-hop record. Again, the skits, hit or miss, whatever, but what's consistent here are its production, its feature utilization, and YBN's use of each style he's aiming to achieve on here. I mean, hell, the closer, Lost and Found, some fucking great writing from YBN, and a fantastic delivery that shows that he's hungry, he's ready to spit some good shit, and he wants to fucking make himself a namesake in the scene. And I think he has with this record. I think this is a fantastic record. One of my favorite hip-hop releases I've heard this year so far. Really consistent, really fun. I'm giving this an 8. It's a great record, guys. This is a lot of fun. A lot of highlights for me personally. Whether he's talking about his life, living it up, he does it all well. It's a great tour de force of YBN's talents. When Slipknot first came back this decade with the Gray Chapter, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of underwhelmed. This was one of the reviews I filmed back in 2015 to act like a catch-up discography review update. It's a record that I don't revisit often. I think it's got moments. I like some of the singles that dropped, but it, like All Hope Is Gone, just feel like them retreading on Volume 3, trying to recapture the same magic. And I don't blame them for doing so. Volume 3 was a huge success for them, and I still hold it as my favorite Slipknot record, even though I have a lot of love for the first 2 Slipknot albums. And I'm speaking so heavily about the discography because I did a discography review on Slipknot, which if you want to check, it's linked in the description. And I will say that because the Gray Chapter underwhelmed me so intensely, I had very tepid expectations for We Are Not Your Kind, even though it's an album that seemed to be getting more accolades than your typical post-Volume 3 Slipknot release. And I gotta say, I honestly do really like this thing. I appreciate that while they are still trying to forge their sound forward and create new ideas, they aren't trying to do it while trying to recapture the magic scene on Volume 3. In fact, if anything, a lot of the heavier moments on here remind me of Iowa than they do Volume 3, which is a lot better to me personally. While Volume 3 is my favorite record, I like that they are taking the time to try and capture the same raw tenacity and anger seen on their first 2 releases. I mean, fuck. Soulway Firth, Neo Forte, and even Unsainted just have this sort of primal aggression. There's this grit and Corey's voice that I feel like I haven't heard in a long fucking time. I also really admire that their synthesizers and SID are used a lot more on this record, on textures like on My Pain and on sections of Not Long for This World, and some of the more dynamic songs that aren't just a lot more brash anger. And I like that. I like that a lot because of it. I feel like the band settles into a new groove on here, and I think that it's a much more solid record than I was expecting at all. I think that it is dynamic. I think it's interesting, and I think that it forges them off into a path that is far more captivating than their last couple of releases were. Not to say I hate All Hope Is Gone either. I also like the way that it tries to recapture Volume 3 more than the Grey Chapter did. It has a better set of acoustic songs and angry songs, but this is just a different beast, and I'm happy about that. I like the lyrics on here. They feel more in tune with Slipknot sound without trying to throw away the progress they've made as a band. I feel like their new drummer feels more in tune here than he did on the Grey Chapter. I think that this just feels like a band firing on all cylinders, which is something that I'm happy to hear, because I do still hold a lot of love for Slipknot. I owe a lot to their first 3 records to me personally. They shaped a lot of my interest in heavier music more after being a thrash kid when I was really younger. They got me into other types of heavy music, and they're one of the bands whose earlier catalog holds up a lot more to me. And I like that now they're still crafting music that is fun to listen to and isn't an exhausting listen that feels like going through the motions all over again. Not a record that I'm going to be putting on my of the year list, I don't think, because while I do like a lot of the artistry here, I feel like the record feels imbalanced. I feel like that the moments where they are trying to experiment a lot, like on My Pain, they stick out like a sore thumb amongst these more brash, heavier songs, or songs that feel more like typical Slipknot fare. And I would have liked to have seen them kind of retool things a little more, change the pacing, maybe do a little more experimenting. I would like to see them do some more off-the-wall shit if they're wanting to do so. So with that in mind, with all that at its core, I'm giving this a 7. Still a lot more than I thought I was going to give it, because the Grey Chapter, I think I have it like a 4, maybe a 5 now. And this is a much better step up than the Grey Chapter was. And I actually am kind of excited to see where Slipknot goes from here.
Slide down Fairfax. Bitch, I've been getting to this money, I can't dare cap.
E40 is a guy that likes to make music. The dude makes so much fucking music. I mean, he made, back earlier this decade, he would drop like 6 albums in a year, and it'd be stacked, like each album would be like an hour long, and it was an exhausting experience. I got into E40 earlier this decade with his Night Shift, Day Shift, Graveyard Shift, you know, those 4 albums, and I still like those records a lot, and I like his earlier stuff as well. I think he's such a unique voice in the genre of hip-hop, and on Practice Makes Paper, the story is kind of the same, but it's also not, because there's moments on here where he's doing kind of what Raekwon was doing on his last solo record, where there's elements of E40's greatness here. I mean, tracks like Wake They Shit Up, even Goat, or Chase the Money has elements that I really enjoy that remind me of good E40. There's also tracks like Big Deal, the track with G-Eazy. I know he's on here somewhere. And the fact that this thing is still like 86 minutes long, I can't with this. It's too much. This is a record that I could enjoy in like one sitting, once like in a couple of months, but this record has some of the same issues I've had with the E40 output that's been happening this year, and also the follies I've seen in some other veterans in the game. And it just leads to a very exhausting listening experience. Don't get me wrong. I like the hyphy beats when they're here. I like the shit that kind of reinvents hyphy in a way and gives some modern injection into it. I think that stuff is fine. I even think some of the hook work on here isn't that bad either. But I don't need almost 90 minutes of E40 Even the records of his that got me into him, I don't listen to the whole thing. That's been my biggest issue with E40 this decade, is that the dude just makes too much. You know, last year he made an album and I put it on the list and I should have listened to it because it was like his old material. It was like 45 minutes and I don't know what possessed him to go back to this, but it's got a lot of E40. It's got a lot of the ideas E40 explores on his other releases. It's got that hustling, got that slang, got his own slang, got some good features, got some focus on that bass scene, but it's also got just too much, and it's draining. I give this a 5. It's not terrible. It's just way too fucking much. I have gone insane. Now, I was very excited for this record because, like I said earlier in this review, in this video, I was a thrash kid. I liked a lot of thrash metal growing up. I love Anthrax. I love me some old school Metallica. I like Slayer. I like Testament. I like Voivod. You know, I like bands like early Sepultura, like pre-Chaos AD Sepultura. I like modern bands like Toxic Holocaust and Skeleton Witch, you know, and King Gizzard just made a really good thrash record this year, and it's so good. This is on par with my favorite King Gizzard and Wizard record now, and it comes out of fucking nowhere. Like, when they were dropping thrash tracks, I was mind blown because they had such a respect for the sound of a thrash record, and it's just insane to me. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. I fucking love this record. I love the breakneck pace that these songs switch up. I love a lot of the song topics because, like Fishing for Fishes, this has some environmental shit. So they're tapping into some Gojira sounds on here lyrically. There's some Gojira topics, like on Planet B and on Mars for the Rich. Really, a lot of this record has a lot of themes of aliens and saving the planet and we need Captain Planet, and it's got some insane guitar work, some impressive drum work. And what's funny though is my favorite song is the sludgier cut on here, Superbug, which is also just insane to me that they made this really lurching, stomping, thudding, muddy sludge track amidst these blinding solos, crazy quick switch up guitar work, and just a tight thrash experience that harkens back to Old Testament and Old Exodus. And again, old Sepultura. I get a lot of when they're doing the shredding and their riff switch ups, I get some real like old school Sepultura vibes on here, and it's awesome to hear. I love that these guys thought to themselves, let's make a thrash record, but let's do it right. And as a dude who loves the genre, I love what they did with it here. And I like, again, they're making topical stuff. Really, my only complaint is I want more. You know, and I think some of the Venetian tracks, hit or miss. They're whatever. You know, not every track on here is perfect, but as a fan of the genre, I still walk away loving this thing wholeheartedly. It is so goddamn good. I give this thing an 8. It's one of my favorite metal releases of the year. It's a standout of the discography. Aces all around. Fantastic work, guys. Let's keep the praise going with Animated Violence Mild by Blanck, a record that I've been heavily anticipating with bated breath because you guys know I fucking love this project. I got into this guy's work from his last project, World Eater, which was this crazy, erratic electronic assault, and on Animated Violence Mild, he does more of that. I mean, fucking Death Drop is so gritty and angry that transitions into House v House, which goes into Hush Money and everything so seamlessly, yet they have so many different sounds. There's some really lush synths throughout this record, like on House vs. House, that have this great boisterousness, that has this kind of manic element to it, or that tone doesn't let up, and it creates this, not cacophonous, but unnerving listening experience. It is harsh. It is so like rhythmic in a very energetic sort of way, and it's everything I love with this subsect of electronic music. I mean, I feel like sonically, it's just as cacophonous as I would want it to be coming off of the last project, but it seemingly is a little more deep in thought and concept because of its explorations and paranoia and destruction and all that sort of stuff. And I like this thing a lot. I like the inclusion of vocals more. I like that they're more prominent, and I think that this is an incredible fucking release. Again, I don't think it's an album of the year contender like his last record was, but this will be high on that of the year list to me personally. I'm just impressed at the work on display here. I love how this thing is produced. I love how the synths sound. I love how, again, these ideas, even though they kind of seem like a stark contrast to each other, flow so seamlessly between each other, and it's impressive to say the least. 9 out of 10. Amazing fucking work. I love this thing to death, and I'm glad that this year just keeps on giving. Next release was a request from Random Rock and Rail Dress Reviews. Terraformer, the latest Thank You Scientist record, a band that I'm not all that familiar with, but after this record, I'm intrigued. Consider me curious to hear what the rest of their catalog sounds like. I will say this record is great. It's a little overwrought. It's still a little too long. As far as not utilizing your sounds in a way that makes me continue to listen. It gets a little self-indulgent and wankery as it goes on. I would have admired more songs like Birdwatching to change up the textures and give the album a little more of a better pace. Because while I like this thing, and I love the brash, I love how lush the brass sounds, I love the artistry within the musicianship, production on tracks like Birdwatching make this record more compelling to me personally. I feel like a lot of the production on the non-brass instruments feels a little flat, feels a little atypical of its genre, and it never does, a lot of that stuff doesn't always do anything for me, you know, and the vocals are actually really interesting on here as well. I love the timbre which with this vocalist sings. It almost reminds me of Coheed and Cambria. I don't know if that's a commonality that people can draw to from this band, but vocally, the guy sounds a lot like Claudio Sanchez. Not in a bad way, because I like Claudio, and I like the way it sounds here. It fits, and it kind of helps as well that the lyrics are very scientific and science fiction and spacey in sound and in lyrics, you know, and that kind of also enhances that Coheed and Cambria sound, because the Coheed and Cambria, a bunch of dorks, are write a really big space opera. But on Terraformer, they do a good job at making this incredibly dynamic experience that could use with some more changes in pacing, but does a good job at keeping the listener intrigued with its various solo work, really nice lyrical nuance, and well utilization of a nice brass ensemble or brass collective. I think that this is a band that I enjoy, and I feel like I am amazed hasn't been done this much in the progressive scene, because I like brass in my prog. I mean, I love King Crimson's first record, and it's on that in a hefty dosage, and it actually reminds me a lot of early King Crimson, this record, and I'm happy about that. Again, could have condensed it a little bit, could have cut a couple of the songs that get a little too wankery, but as a whole, I like this record a lot. I think it's really, really good, and it's a nice rock album in the prog scene to drop this year. I give this an 8. It'll probably be on the low end of my top 50, but it's a great record. Thank you for the suggestion, my guy.
There's coppers from Scotland all the way down to Dagenham.
As I am happy to have invested my time into Slowthai. Jesus Christ, this guy is very talented and also very Dizzy Rascal. A comparison I know has been thrown at him before, but I mean, when you have this kind of production, you have this kind of sound, and you have this kind of flow, and this kind of voice, like sound to your voice, it's kind of hard to not draw that parallel. He does it himself on the opening track, and it also helps that he gets very British very fast. This does for the grime scene what Idols did for the punk scene over the last couple of years for Britain. It is super British, super enveloped in the scene going on in Britain, and very political, but I'm very okay with that, because Slowthai surrounds himself with some incredible instrumentals, some really nice features, and a great set of lyrics under his belt. The guy has just this great bite to his sound that is enticing. You know, while as Wiley's Wiley's Godfather was sort of a showcase of Grime's evolution, this record does a great job at throwing grime back into its roots by injecting a lot of modern UK hip-hop ideas into its sort of bloodbath of politics and just great British slang. If you're a fan of UK hip-hop or grime and haven't listened to Slowthai yet, you're really sleeping on a great record that's come out this year. I think this thing is tight, I think this thing is fun, and I think this thing has a lot of really good ideas in it. And I give it an 8. It's another 8. It's another great 8 to drop this year that I checked out in the last month.
Mario Party and your ass got invited. Ain't no need to worry or get over it.
Out of the pantheon of this kind of conglomerate of Game Grumps affiliated musical acts, like Ninja Sex Party, Starbomb, and Twerp, to a small degree, because they work with both of those bands. Starbomb have always been my least favorite, which is funny because it's more tied to Game Grumps as a concept, but I've always found their music to be too one-note. You know, while Ninja Sex Party is very one-note in the fact that it's a crass band writing songs about sex, they've done a great job at making different ideas surrounding around the topic of sex humor. Starbomb haven't quite been the same, and I think that's a bigger reason why the band hasn't been as consistent as putting out releases. And while I think Tryforce's production is a lot better thanks to Twerp, because Twerp just makes everything better, this has some of the same follies seen on other Starbomb records. I think some of the songs are fine. I like Filing in the Name of, and its sort of homage to Rage Against the Machine. I like A Boy in His Boat, because I'm always down for some Zelda. And Welcome to the Mario Party makes me want Twerp to make some fucking G-Funk. And Aaron's rapping on that song, actually kind of impressive. He's good at putting on a Snoop Dogg pastiche. I even like Vegeta Serenade. That song is fucking awesome. And while it kind of breaks the trope of songs about video games, Starbomb is also just kind of a geek culture band. Vegeta Serenade is actually really beautiful, and I think is a well-composed, soft moment to help close the record out, even though it technically doesn't. This also just kind of has a lot of nothing tracks. The wild guitar solo feels more like a track that would belong on a Ninja Sex Party record. Donkey Kong Jr. is dumb in a not fun way. The Aaron Checks the Mic interlude is also just kind of whatever. Again, no disrespect to Danny or Aaron. I love them. I think they're very talented guys in their own respect. I've never found Aaron's rapping to be consistently enticing. There's songs on the first two records that I enjoy, and the rapping on this record, there's moments where it's fine. While I think the Overwatch song kind of overstays its welcome, there's elements of it that remind me of the Beastie Boys and that kind of era of hip-hop, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But as a critic, I just can't help but think that they could put their resources to use on better things. And I know that critiquing comedy usually isn't fun, and I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer of this scenario. I just didn't find a lot of this record incredibly hilarious. Again, there's songs that work. There's elements that are funny. And there's even elements where their artistry creates a funny song. Like, again, Vegeta Serenade might be the best song Starbomb have ever pulled together. But some of the jokes run themselves too far into the ground. This record feels like them just filling out a contractual obligation the whole fucking time. And it just brings the whole vibe of the record down. I'm personally giving this a 5. I'm sorry if you like this record more than me. I just see glaring issues with this record every time I revisit it, and it makes it a not fun experience for me personally. Yeah! You know, I was a moderate fan of Killswitch Engage back in high school. I thought they were a solid metal band. They had a great they had two great vocalists, And they had a great band they had great players amongst their band. I really think Adam Dukowitz is one of the more dynamic players in the metalcore genre. And I think he's made a good name for himself in the genre as well, not just in front of the strings, but behind the production as well. And on Atonement, the latest Killswitch Engage record and the first one I've checked out since I stopped listening to them, sees the band pretty much where I left them, with really solid riff work, some fun solos, and some downright vicious vocal lines. I think Jesse Leach sounds so biting on this record, and I think that on a lot of this, he just gnarls his teeth in the best way possible, but they still don't lose that melodic edge, and I feel like that's what still sets them apart from being just an immure or typical metalcore band, metalcore, deathcore band, and your kind of middle-of-the-road, bland metalcore that comes out like 12 times a year. One of the bigger elements of this record that I actually really enjoy also is the single, The Signal Fire. I liked seeing both vocalists together. I think they create a great dynamic, and I would honestly like a whole record of that. But outside of that, I also like Chuck Billy on I Am Broken too. He's good on there. Again, I think a lot of the solo work and riff work is fine. I think the opener, Unleashed, is very gnarled and angry, and it taps into a sound that I think works. You know, part of the reason why I checked this out is because I liked the last 36 Crazy Fist record. That was a metalcore band that I used to really love back in high school, and they seem to be continuing up their great work, and so do Killswitch Engage. Sure, I think it gets a little, monotonous by the end of it. You know, I feel like Know Your Enemy through Ravenous really gets through the end of the record, the back half of the record, because there isn't anything dynamic in the personnel working on a song. It gets a little monotonous. It gets a little atonal. It gets a little typical Killswitch. But even amongst that, there's some good riff work, some good solo work, and Jesse Leach does a good job at being very harsh and visceral and great at tying a hook together. You know, this is a serviceable metal record, and it's fine in its own regard. It gets a 6. The King of the Sixes this year is another really solid fucking metal record. It doesn't do anything wrong. It just doesn't do anything to excite me consistently every time I revisit it. And that's really, if I could drive anything home in this video, is that's what sets a 6 from a 7 or a 5. It does a good job at doing a thing. It just has some elements that really weigh it down and hold back the moments that really shine. And arguably, there's far less moments that shine than some of the other 6s I've given this year, but I think that what holds it back isn't all that underwhelming. It's just kind of normal. It's par for the course for Killswitch Engage to me at this point in their career, which is impressive because they've been doing it for so long. Now, Crash, he was the one who even after he dropped his review and tweeted about it, he told me, he said, Johnny, you need to listen to this record. If there's one thing you do for me, it's listen to A Boat on the Sea. And I can definitely see why. This record is great. It's a lot of fun. I was not familiar with Moron Police until I saw his review. And to his credit, this is very up my alley. It's weird. It's all over the place. It's like a Devin Townsend record through the eyes of Les Claypool. It's zany. It's got a lot of odd musical elements, but it's tied under this umbrella of tight rock, a great booming production, and a lot of heart in its lyrics. You know, it's as odd as it is to say, a lot of the lyrics on here, when they're being sincere, they are very well written. I love tracks like The Phantom Below and The Invisible King and The Undersea. You know, I think that they do a great job at painting pictures and doing this with a huge ounce of sincerity across this track listing. It's fucking awesome. I think their musicianship is tight. I think that to say that the production is a little too much is understandable, but I personally have no problem with that. If you liked Empath, the Devin Townsend record that dropped this year, and you don't mind a little bit of weirdness, you'll like a boat on the sea. I don't want to say it's carbon copy, but it does have a lot of the same oomph and bigness and punchiness to its sound that record had. It's just actually a little less weird than Devin Townsend, even though it looks like a fucking wet dream of someone who loves that type of music.
I mean, for fuck's sake, Captain Awkward is an anime opening waiting to happen, and it's awesome.
It's great. It's a fantastic fucking record, and honestly, watch his review. It's linked up on the card in the description. I like this thing a lot. Check it out. Check his review out after this video. I give this a 9. It's a great fucking record. Again, probably not top tier of the year for me personally, but I think this record is very much me, and I'm happy that Crash showed it to me, and I'm glad to have experienced it. Aces for me, my guy. Good record. Thank you for the recommendation. So this should have been a home run for Sleater-Kinney. St. Vincent has had an impressive run this decade. She's owned her scene, and she's done a lot of really good things for music this decade. The Center Won't Hold isn't one of those things. I like songs on this record. I like the first run of it, but by the middle of the record, this thing takes a steep nosedive, and it's understandable why their drummer left so abruptly before this record's release. Her performance, even on the tracks I like Hurry On Home and Reach Out, feel neutered. It's definitely neutered by the end of the record with tracks like Love and The Dog, The Body. And it's weird because before this record was released, I hadn't checked any of the lead singles, but I was very excited because I like Sleater-Kinney and I like St. Vincent. And like I said, this should have been a home run. But some of the writing just isn't good. Some of the vocal performances just don't sound well in the songs that they're in. And this feels like a melding of musings that are played out at this point from the scene, and it almost feels like Sleater-Kinney are playing catch-up in a game that they weren't really needing to catch up in, because No Cities to Love was an amazing comeback for them. It was a fucking tour de force of their talent as songwriters, as performers. The production was consistent, and it was just a great fucking record. And on this, they just seemingly decide to not follow that up with anything compelling, or consistently compelling, and it's upsetting because there's promise here. The songs that I like, aces, really good stuff. Not on par with their Golden Age material or on a lot of what's on No Cities to Love, but it's still a good set of, there's still some good ideas here. It just isn't followed up. There's no follow through here. It kind of flounders out by the end of the record, and it leaves me very underwhelmed. Again, not worst of the year material by any means necessary, but it's a lot more mediocre than I was thinking it would be, because its negatives hold it back a fuck ton, which is upsetting. And again, its highs don't reach as high as I would want for a band like Sleater-Kinney. But yeah, this is pretty average. I'm giving this a 5, which I was hoping to give this like an 8. This could have easily been a 9 if the forces at hand just didn't do whatever the fuck this was. To lift my spirits up after The Center Won't Hold, I turned back to space jazz. This has been a great year for the niche style that is space jazz, and the Japanese band DeLorean's debut, DeLorians, is another notch on that belt. And this combines so many things I love from this concept. It's progressive rock with some really nice guitar work, some really crunchy guitar work at points too, some space jazz, and some weird jazz. You know, while I like stuff like what was seen on Thank You Scientist, this is where the magic happens. I like how fucking bizarre this record is. I like how there's elements that have lounge injection. This is like if you took all of my niche loves within music and put them in a blender and just set it to frappe. This thing is smooth. This thing transitions across itself so masterfully amidst its weird guitar lines, its jittery brass playing, and its odd injections of like lounge and smoothness. It's awesome. It is so awesome, and it's got that Japanese twist that I love so very much. This is, again, very up my alley. My only issue is that it's a bit too brief. At 8 songs and 30 minutes, it's about as long as the other space jazz record that wasn't Thank You Scientist, the one with the really long name that's on screen now. Whereas that I could have easily listened to for a long time. I feel like I'm getting less with this release. You know, I feel like it just cuts off too short, too soon. You know, while that record was full of drones and some weird jazz nuance, this is just a lot of really cool jazz ideas thrown into the pile, and I love it. It is so cool. I love the kind of overarching sound that's set forth on Daytona that's reinforced in its reprise, but comes up on A Ship of Mental Health and Rokotsu. You know, there's sort of instrumental nuance that's planted early on in the record that still comes up and pays off in motifs in certain little sections of the record that I liked. I liked a lot. And I adore this thing. Even though I'm giving it such high praise, I am giving it an 8. Because again, I just feel like this could have been explored so much more. Could have done like another 4 songs of this, and I would have just fleshed out some more of the nuance, give some more love to some of the ideas that are introduced in sections of the record, and give them more places to breathe. That's all I really wanted. That's what would have set this record above and beyond some of the other space jazz that's happened this year. We're ending the month on Taylor Swift. I was morbidly curious about this record because I'm not the biggest Taylor Swift fan. I'm gonna be honest. The only record of hers I really love wholeheartedly is 1989. I think Red is fine and has some good singles, but I'm not much of a country pop fan, at least not Taylor Swift's particular brand of country pop in her first couple of releases. But 1989 was something very special and magical, and seemingly transcended a lot of what was happening in her life, and that she had done since by a large margin. And she squandered that with Reputation and made just a trendy, shitty pop record. And I was afraid that Lover was going to be more of the same, because I don't like the lead singles off of this thing. I fucking hate Me. And I hate the pandering that happens on You Need to Calm Down. I'm happy that someone with Taylor Swift's profile is highlighting gay rights and giving, you know, the gay community something to take pride in, but I don't like... Todd did a great dissection of You Need to Calm Down, and I agree with a lot of the sentiments he said in it. I feel like it feels disingenuous given how the song is structured, given how it's written, and I just would have rather her do more with the idea of making a song advocating gay rights than what she did on You Need to Calm Down. But I'm not here to just talk about the politics of that song. This record, Lover, is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I was genuinely surprised with this record, but I'm also left kind of gobsmacked because I can't help but feel like this is just a Carly Rae Jepsen record with a Taylor Swift coat of paint. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because as you guys probably have guessed by now, I love Carly Rae Jepsen. She makes some really fucking great pop music. And there's elements of that on here. Not just the sounds of Carly Rae Jepsen, but really good pop songwriting. I love Cruel Summer. I even love I Think He Knows, even though it is the most Carly Rae Jepsen-ass Carly Rae Jepsen song. I think Paper Rings is a nice, boisterous, rock-tinged cut. And I think tracks like Cornelia Street and Death by a Thousand Cuts do a good job at making a sugary, sweet love song that is different than the love songs Taylor Swift has written before. I even like Soon You'll Get Better. The more I revisit the song, the more I like it. I feel like I would have liked the country-tinged textures to be more on the forefront. I think the Dixie Chicks' presence is felt on the song, but I would have liked it done a little more. You know, make me feel some Sturgill Simpson, Casey Musgraves type shit if you're wanting to channel contemporary country in a good way. Or even Chris Stapleton, do something like that. I also think that the tail end of this record, after Soon You'll Get Better, is where the record really starts to kind of... And I guess before that, you know, London Boy, kind of a shit song, but there's at least a glimmer with Soon You'll Get Better. But this record is, like some of the records I've talked about this month, just a little much. It's a little too long. It's a little overwrought. And honestly, that's its biggest fault outside of some of the bad songs that coat the tail end of the record. I think that this record starts off on a really strong foot, and it follows through on a lot of its ideas pretty consistently. But like I said, it has the positives of a Carly Rae Jepsen album, for sure. However, it also brings some of those follies seen on Emotion and her latest record, also in full force. It's a little too much. Needs a little trim. Needs a little cut down. Needs a little ratcheting in. And that's ultimately my biggest complaint with the record, is that. You know, I don't mind the sugary sweetness if you write a good song in that kind of sound. That's why I like Carly Rae Jepsen. That's why I like Cara Cara Bonito. And that's why I like Elements of 1989 and why I like Elements of Lover, because it does a good job at making sugary sweet so addictive to listen to. And that's really what I have to say about it. You know, I feel like if you like this record a lot more than me, I understand. I understand why. I just personally think that it's a little average. And I hate to do this, but I'm also giving this record a 6 out of 10. It's fine. It's not offensive in any sort of way. I mean, there's bad songs on here, but it's not like it's a chore to sit through. It's an hour long, but it's a pretty brief hour outside of some of the shitty songs in the tail end. The first leg of this record flows beautifully, majestically, and almost perfectly, and I only wish that she took the time to trim some of the fat, maybe utilize some of the production a little better, because while I like Paper Rings, I want the production to be just a little tighter. Jack Antonoff, I know you can do this kind of stuff. I don't know what happened on that song, but while I really love that song, the production just needs a little more zhuzh. Needs zhuzhed up a little bit to make the drums a little punchier, the guitars a little better. I know it's a pop song. Excuse me. I know it's a pop song, but Kesha on Rainbow wasn't afraid to stray from introducing more rock sounds into her atmosphere. And I feel like if you were going to make one song like that on this record, you need to really make it stand on that kind of level, if you ask me. So that's why it's getting a 6. It's not that bad. And that's pretty much going to be the month. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support on here and on Patreon. I'm going to get out of here. I have been Val Orac. You guys have good days, lives, and situations. And I'll see you another day. Alright, let's talk about Tool. Fear Inoculum, the latest record from Prague juggernauts Tool. See them making a type of record that isn't new, but doing it in a very Tool way. Can't think of a better way to say that, but This record has the ideas of a Catch-33 by Meshuggah, or an Eye of Meshuggah, if you're just talking about a titular one thing, where it's kind of this big song, or this set of songs that has recurring instrumental or recurring segments and writings, but it doesn't do that idea as good to me as those records. While I'm happy this doesn't suck, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little underwhelmed by it. Bit of backstory, I'm not the biggest Tool fan, but I do like a couple of records in their catalog. I think Undertow is really solid. I love Lateralis and Enema, but I will say 10,000 Days has some of the follies also seen on Fear Inoculum. It's a little self-indulgent, it's a little overwrought, and on Fear Inoculum, they kind of play that patience to a T by having a lot of sections where the band just kind of drones and meanders and kind of gets kind of wrapped up in their own hubris. And while I know that's kind of the point of the album, this album is meant to be methodical, it's meant to be a patience tester, it's meant to be hypnotic in a sense, it leaves, when they're not, when Adam Jones or Justin Chancellor aren't making really nice open bass sounds or really good solos, they're left playing this monotonous sound, and a lot of the work is left on poor old Danny Carey, which isn't bad, because Danny Carey fucking owns this entire release, and he's the foundation that keeps this kind of perpetual pendulaic drone all the more tied to a foundation. But I can't help but walk away from this record thinking, I wish there were more here. You know, while I like the lyrics on Invincible, I love the punchiness in Tempest, and when that happens on tracks like Fear Inoculum and Descending. And I love the drums on Chocolate Chip Trip. A track like Chocolate Chip Trip sticks out like a sore thumb on this record because, at least on the physical release, because it breaks the pace of the concept of the album. You know, while on the digital version they added more interludes and instrumental passages, they detract from the record because they aren't as good as Chocolate Chip Trip. But Chocolate Chip Trip is a fucking great song. It's got a lot of really cool synthetic textures that Danny Carey fucking demolishes behind the kit. I'm not trying to be devil's advocate. I'm not trying to slam this record as a contrarian. I do like it more than 10,000 Days because while 10,000 Days is a very heartfelt record, it is the embodiment of Tool getting wrapped up in their own bullshit. This at least runs with its idea pretty much till the end, outside of Chocolate Chip Trip and the interludes on the digital version. They keep that hypnotic sound consistent. And while it gets a little Diet Lateralis-y on some instances, like on Calling Voices, some of the riff work on that, and on Descending, it's very Diet Lateralis, it still works. There's no band that really sounds like Tool, and that's why this record still wows people. I personally just feel like this record wouldn't have been as well received if it wasn't Tool doing it. You know, to throw it back to Catch-33, why I like Catch-33, which is a record I'll probably talk about on Let Me Tell You About, is because it takes its idea of a song as an album and does it full stop. This toys with that idea by having some riff work that sounds similar to riff work from other songs, and having lyrical themes that tie into this idea of aging and almost being cyclical to a degree. But whereas that worked on Lateralis because of its whole Fibonacci dumb shit, this doesn't feel as thought out as an album like Lateralis or 10,000 Days did. Which is weird because this record's been in the works off and on for a while. And I would expect Tool to not half-ass a concept, but I feel like on this album it's a little half-assed. I don't want to say I'm disappointed, because I'm not. I feel like for a Tool record, this could have been much worse. This could have been far, far worse. But I don't think it's as good as their Golden Age material. And that's why I'm giving it a 7. I'm giving Fear Inoculum a 7 out of 10. It's a solid record. It's a very, very solid record that in instances really shows me a glimmer of something that could be better. And I'm not saying there needs to be more aggression. I think when the aggression's here, it's fine. And I think that Maynard does well without the more aggressive tones on here. I think that the lyrics don't call for that, and that's what's important. And I feel like on this record, they do a good job at capturing the sound they were aiming for. I just would have liked to have seen them do more with the sonic concept of the record. And that's why I'm giving it the 7. And that's my thoughts on the records I listened to this month. What did you think of them? What did you think of the albums that I talked about? Is there an album you would like for me to talk about? Leave it in the comments down below. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again for your support on here and on Patreon. If you'd like to join my patrons and support this channel, there's a link in the description of my Patreon. I'm going to get out of here. I have been Foul Rack. You guys have videos, life situations, and I'll see you another day.
You